So Mitch McConnell proved somewhat flexible on including stimulus checks in the relief bill that was signed by President Trump on Sunday in an effort to save Republicans in Georgia and, more importantly, his power in the Senate. In the absence of Trump, McConnell becomes the most powerful Republican in the party and on some days the most powerful politician in Congress, as Ryan Grimm notes. D.C. Bureau Chief of the Intercept, Ryan Grimm, joins us now to discuss. Ryan, it's so great to have you. And this was actually a dynamic that Sagar picked up on right away because McConnell made those comments like on the $600 checks that were in this relief bill, that he very clearly understood that they were important to the political fortunes of his Georgia senators that he wants to keep in office. Clearly, he knew that political calculus before Trump's election, too, but decided not to move on the checks before Trump's election.
Yeah, that comment that he made in that call with Republican senators was sort of the last data point that you really needed to take your intuition and everything you felt you understood about McConnell's approach to the general election and to Trump and take it to a place where you can say, okay, now I'm confident that I can conclude that Mitch McConnell was quite fine with Donald Trump losing the presidential election. Because, as you said, his comment to the Republican senators was quite clear. He was explaining to them why he was reversing himself on his willingness to put in, direct checks into this last relief package. And what he said to them was, Kelly and David are getting hammered. He couldn't be more explicit than that. Kelly, of course, that's Kelly Loeffler, the wife of the New York Stock Exchange owner who was appointed at McConnell's insistence to the Senate in Georgia, and David Perdue, former CEO of Reebok, former CEO of Dollar General, who's now also a Georgia senator, and they're both running in runoffs. They were getting hammered by Ossoff in particular, but also Warnock for not supporting a relief package and in particular not supporting checks. And Mitch McConnell bowed to the political reality. He said, "Look, we've got to put this in the bill in order to help Kelly and David down in Georgia." Now, of course, Donald Trump was itching for that same kind of lifeline, in September and October. But McConnell's idea at the time was different. It was essentially no. Now, Trump has plenty of blame himself here. He blew the stimulus himself through the fall by focusing instead on Hunter Biden and by not giving Steve Mnuchin any clear direction and not himself kind of pounding the table for it beyond a couple of tweets here or there. So there's plenty of blame to go around. But what you can divine at this point is that, McConnell kind of got the result that he's fine with.
I mean, it's kind of an exercise in futility to divine what Mitch McConnell actually cares about. The one thing that's really clear is he cares about his own position in power. He cares about keeping control of the Senate. But one of the things that he does tout all the time is pushing these conservative judges and ultimately Supreme Court justices through. Of course, that's only possible under a Republican president. So I guess that would be the counter argument, is that he actually, he got what he wanted out of the Trump administration. He got the conservative judges, got that big corporate tax cut package that people like he and Paul Ryan were super excited about and have been preparing for years. So for him, what was the issue with the Trump administration?
It becomes a question of margins and trade-offs. Over the last 4 years, there were a ton of vacancies on the federal judiciary. Some of that is the fault of the Obama administration for foot dragging. Some of that is the fault of Pat Leahy, who was the Judiciary Committee chairman, who just wouldn't allow vacancies to be filled if the Republicans from that state wouldn't agree with it. Whoever you want to blame. And then McConnell, in his last 2 years, basically shut down the confirmation process. So there were dozens and dozens of vacancies for McConnell to fill when Trump finally came into office. On top of that, you had 3 vacancies, including Merrick Garland, who didn't get through, that Trump was able to fill at the Supreme Court level. And so Trump has McConnell, I should say, has really run the table on the federal judiciary. He's got a 6-3 supermajority on the Supreme Court. And he's got a lock on the federal courts and filled almost all of those vacancies. So the question then was, how much more can he run the table on the federal judiciary in the next 4 years versus what is the price that he's going to have to pay for that? And importantly, what is the alternative? And I think that the calculus changes once it's clear that Joe Biden is becoming the nominee. If it's a Bernie Sanders or even Elizabeth Warren, then McConnell is kind of, he's kind of in a dogfight for the next 4 years. But if it's Joe Biden, McConnell has known Joe Biden most of his life. He has Joe Biden's number. Every time he's sat down to negotiate with Joe Biden, he's picked his pocket. And so you look at the different potential realities for McConnell, and okay, he has to put up with Joe Biden in the White House for he probably assumes four years at the most, and that's a situation that is going to be beneficial to congressional Republicans in a lot of ways. 2022, if Biden continues on the trajectory he's on, is going to be a very good year for Republicans, unless Democrats can pull some rabbit out of a hat. And so then going into 2024, you face a weakened Democratic Party. McConnell becomes, it continues to be the most powerful Republican in the country, and possibly the most powerful politician, depending on how Biden is doing. And then Republicans have a shot at, sweeping full control of Washington again in 2024. And this time, ideally for McConnell, doing it without Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone could argue the man is not a savvy operator, especially having watched, some of what he's built from the ground up in Kentucky as well. What do you think that this means for the status of a vote on $2,000 checks in the Senate? As you know, and we've been reporting here, Bernie Sanders has signaled he's really willing to play hardball here. He's going to hold up the vote on the NDAA, which will force senators to stay in Washington. He can't keep it off the floor entirely, but he can force them to stay in Washington over the New Year's Eve break, something they definitely don't want to do. On the other hand, McConnell doesn't really want to bring this to the floor because it's a very tough vote for his senators to have to take. Will divide the caucus. Unclear whether there's 60 votes there for the checks or not. So what do you think his calculus looks like on this?
It's really interesting. It's one of those moments where I'm not really sure what he's going to do, because getting to $600 was I think for him what he considered the limit of what he was willing to do. But he desperately wants to hold on to the United States Senate. And there's kind of a phrase from poker for this. He's sort of pot committed. He's got $600 in the pot. That's gone. So the question is, does he want to put up another $1,400 in order to continue to play this hand, or fold at this point and then have the last 5 days of the Georgia special election be all about how Republicans stood in the way of the relief checks that President Trump wanted. And so the question then becomes, is McConnell willing to enact this policy that he strongly opposes in order to hold on to the Senate? If you go by McConnell's history, you would have to gamble that yes, he will actually come down on the side of spending that money. It's not his money anyway. And if he decides that he thinks he can hold on to the Senate without doing it, then that's what he'll do. But if he thinks he needs to do it, then he probably goes for it. But it's almost a coin toss at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those rare times where it is very hard to predict which way it's all going to go down. Ryan, thank you so much. Great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And next on Rising, we're going to get an update on those two key Senate races on the ground in Georgia from a reporter there. And that's when Rising continues.